Test.
Test.
Hello?
Can I start? Sure.
Thank you.
All right, can we
Test,
start?
test, test.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. It's an early session today. So my name is Sarah Daniel. I manage Doha Tech Angels, which is an investment club that invests in early stage technology companies here in Qatar. With us today, we have two portfolio companies of DTA, but we also have one of the very first VC funds in the region, so Tamer from Venture Souk. We're going to start with a quick round of introduction. Please start by introducing yourselves, but also your businesses. And then for the rest of the sessions, we're going to delve into three big topics. The first one is what to look out for in your first investors. So first investors. The second one is, as you're starting to scale, what are the difficult decisions that you tend to make? And the last one is, how do you prepare for an exit and for the last parts of a startup's life? So I'll leave it to you to introduce yourself. Nathan.
Hi, my name is Nathan Rustandi. I'm CEO and co-founder of a company called Nafas. At Nafas, we're building hardware and software technologies to help buildings become healthy indoor environments. We're originally headquartered in Singapore, but we launched first in Indonesia. So me, along with my co-founder, and recently we've been exploring expanding to the Gulf, and we're now here part of Startup Qatar. We're also backed by Doha Tech Angels. So really good to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Afif Zaman. I'm from Bangladesh. So I'm founder and CEO of a company called ShopUp. So what we have built at ShopUp is a platform for consumer goods businesses to reach customers at scale by selling to small and large retailers and hotels and restaurants. To facilitate this, we have built primarily three things. So the number one is the commerce infrastructure, which is primarily the procurement platform through which these brands sell to these retailers and hotels and restaurants. Today in our first market, which is Bangladesh, our partners reach to roughly around 30 million people by selling through these partners. Number two is the logistics infrastructure. So we have a network of hubs and trucks, etc. So we do roughly around 1 million metric tons of goods movement on our platform now. The third thing is the financial services infrastructure, which is basically a series of embedded financing products, which are all licensed Sharia compliant. So these are products basically that facilitates the financing of the invoices on our platform. Till date, we have done roughly around 150,000 invoices that we finance, roughly around $500 million that we have disbursed through this. So that's basically what we are building. So after building in the first market, which is Bangladesh, we are now basically partnering for the Gulf market. Like, of course, all of us know that 35% of Gulf people actually comes from South Asia. So there is a lot of trade that basically happens here already. So we are very, very excited about building for both these regions, but on top of that for the trade corridor as well.
Thanks.
And I'm Tamer Kadumi. It's great to be here. I'm Palestinian American. I run a venture capital fund manager. For size context, we have roughly $300 million under management. We have a portfolio of over 300 companies, so very broad, and principally investing here in the region. And I want to say that we started as an angel network, as a syndicate of individual investors coming together. We share a ton of DNA with DTA. We're very, very similar in the makeup and the composition of what we are with DTA. We have portfolio companies that are similar to what both of you guys are doing. One of them is a B2B marketplace here in the GCC that's a close partner of Afif's. So great to be here.
Thank you for that. So first off, just a bit of context. Afif is one of the first company that DTA ever invested in. So first company in our portfolio. And Nathan is the last one company that we've invested in. So we also really have 6 years of investment here right now. And as Tamer said, there's a lot of collaboration between VentureSouk and DTA because we are an investment club. We're a group of investors as angels, but we also have the aspirations to eventually become more of a venture fund. So that's the DNA that's running through here. So I'm going to first start with DTA is an early investor, so one of the first investors that you close. From your experience, what are the most important characteristics that the very first investors must have? Yeah.
I think I think the main thing is they need to have a very strong conviction on the problem you're solving, and just kind of have a very strong belief in the capabilities of the team. I think building an early stage company, there are just so many unknowns, and you have these grand plans, but of course plans change really, really fast. So it's really kind of finding an investor that kind of has that very strong fit from that perspective. And then of course it's just kind of like more of a vibe check as well, right? You kind of you get along with the investors, the partners, and you really get a good sense that these are partners that can support you in the long term. And yeah, that's kind of what we look for.
Afif, what you look for, but also what maybe mistakes you've made in this area.
Yeah, I think maybe I can start by saying what is probably not a right fit when you look at an early stage investor. So I think for me the biggest one is, see, when you're starting a company like early stage, it's basically most of it, like 100% of it is offense game, like it's not defense. So early investors who focus a lot on how to manage downside protection, for me is a big red flag, like in an early stage investor, because you will, as you grow, it becomes a little bit of a defense game, like at least part of your big business becomes that, but early stage is 100% a full offense game. An early stage investor who focuses too much on downside protection, for me, they're playing the wrong game at the wrong time. So they are the toughest to manage going forward. I think the other thing I would say is, like, in my experience, I've seen the same investor being an amazing fit to a founder, but an absolute disaster for another one. So it basically goes down to what the founder really needs. So I'm not talking about industry like fintech. These does not matter. But a first-time founder needs a very different support compared to a second-time founder. Like a founder in emerging market versus a Silicon Valley, like they need very different kind of early investors. Like same with the founder coming from an operator background versus, let's say, someone coming from academia. Like all of them require very different kind of support. So for a founder to really know that, I think is very important, because your first 2-3 investors are like DNA for your company, right? So their partnership will manifest in many ways that you don't even understand from the day one. So it's very important to basically think through about that and make sure you have the right partners there.
Okay, I'm just going to bounce back on that, because some of the things were very easy to implement. So for instance, when Afif said about looking at a defensive investor versus an offensive investor, so basically it's about looking at the terms. If someone coming in early on is looking at different liquidation rights and different ratchets and things like that, then that would be more of a defensive investor, just to give a bit more context here. So that's easy to implement. But the second part of what you said was each founder can have a different chemistry with your investor. That's hard to find out. Are there specific ways that you can find out? Can you take time as you're raising your first round to meet the investor? You see what I mean? So
yeah, I think it's, for me, like I can go back to my first check that I got. Like almost got. I had to say no at the final meeting because it was basically like a 6 angel investors. For me, it was like the dream group of investors because all of them were operators, very much a good fit for me. But in the final meeting, so just to give you a little bit more context, the first version of ShopUp was a pure software platform. We had around 50,000 users, but it was free. They said that you have to charge $1 for each. Now, it might be a good advice for a different kind of stage of company, maybe not in Bangladesh. So I had to say no because I knew eventually it will not work out, right? So I think you have to go through that process to understand who is a better fit for you. So that's the way I actually at least understood that.
great. Tamer, love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, you observe a lot of characteristics of the companies at the stages that they're at, and you draw conclusions from that. One observation is that you need two things simultaneously. You need to present yourself as a founder. Most founders do present themselves with this unwavering confidence, really strong conviction that what they're doing is going to change the world, and they know exactly what they're doing. Like they never give up. They never give way to the belief that, okay, I'm challenging you, and I have unwavering conviction that what I'm doing is right, and try to prove me wrong. Like, you need to do that, and then at the same time, those same people have a tremendous amount of uncertainty and insecurity and shakiness of what they're doing. So in truth, they actually are very uncertain of the way things are going to go. They're trying something new. They're treading on uncharted territory. They don't really know what steps to take, but they act like they do. And that's like part of the game. You have to do that in order to get the money, but then as soon as you've gotten the money, it comes clean that like, oh, actually, I have no idea what they're doing. I think that what investors can do the most is to basically have the appetite to let the company go and figure themselves out. So the investors that have a sort of rigid idea of what the company should be doing or KPIs of where the company should be. I'm not saying KPIs are bad, but I'm saying that trying to stick the founder into some plan or box is going to hurt the founder from a confidence standpoint, and two, it's going to make it difficult to figure out where the company actually finds its footing and does well. And so I think you want to gauge, okay, who is going to sort of like let me run, and then the second thing that, and it's like to your question, how do you know in advance? Introductions, like network, introducing people to each other, that is the currency of when you make a seed or a Series A even investment. That's like what the value add is. I mean, if you want to distill, like, are you willing to send email or WhatsApp intros to people that could be helpful? And there's lots of people that could be helpful. And so you can gauge before the investment happens, you can gauge, is this someone who's willing to do that loosely, easily, quickly? Yeah. Like they're willing to tap the network to give it to you, or is this someone who's like trading on, okay, hold on, let me hold off, let me be, cautious about who I introduce you to. That behavior will continue. If you find someone who's very, very, very open to making introductions to people that okay, maybe it doesn't go anywhere, but maybe it does, then that's probably going to continue after the investment has been made.
Great. I want to now start tackling a second subject. Also, the reason why we have Nafas today and Nathan actually and Afif is because they're both very, very seasoned founders. It's not their first business. Okay, for Afif, he's been doing this for 6 years, but he's reached a very large, very far in what he's building. And Nathan, it's his actually second or third business, so has experience in this. So I wanted to tackle the second subject, which is more about scaling. And it's not the pretty part about scaling, not how things go great and you're just flying through and you're just raising lots of money and then you're exiting, but more about the hard and difficult decisions you make to get there. So I know that's not an easy question, but I want to know about the hardest decision that you ever had to make, be it with Nefas or your previous venture.
So I think maybe, and I think, every business is of course, fundamentally very different. The psychological makeup of founders can be very different as well. But some of the big challenges that we faced was kind of, we were building hardware during COVID, kind of at the height of COVID, right? Which obviously is just a nightmare. We were lucky that we have like a strong kind of background in manufacturing. We understand supply chain. I have a lot of experience working in China, but COVID just kind of shut everything off. And then after COVID, there was a massive supply chain crunch. And so we actually had to, rebuild our entire hardware system. We had to migrate to a new chip, and we had to just basically almost build from scratch. So I think the difficulty is in kind of realizing, is this the point where I quit? Is this the point where I stop? Or can we sort of like persevere and sort of push through, right? And 2 years, fast forward 2 years later, I'm here now, and we're at the forefront of a huge opportunity. So I think it's really just that, making that decision of like, okay, this is where I not quit, and actually there is still kind of like a path forward, right? And it's very hazy. Yeah. And yeah, I think that's.
But you put yourself a metric, like, I'm not quitting until this happens, or I'm going to give it another 6 months, and then is there some kind of scientific approach, or it's just a gut?
I think it's a bit of both, and then you compound that with rejections, and and then you get insecure as a founder. It's like, oh, do I really even know what I'm doing, right? And so you just kind of have to like it is a lot of, I think, then comes down to like, your gut instinct, and you have to talk to, you need to have good advisors and people that can give you good sound advice, right? So we're lucky that, you know, we have a lot of close friends, angel investors that were, you know, successful founders, very strong operators, and just generally very good people that could give us kind of the right feedback and give us kind of like the right confidence, be like, actually, you know, you're onto something. You should push through.
Great. So it gets back to the investor's role in this, right? Who the investor you choose and how they help out in that.
Absolutely. And I think in the early stage, you need to have angel investors that, you know, are not just going to be like, you know, that can instill that confidence in you.
Great.
Yeah, I think maybe I can share not the specific hard decisions or days, but more about the times. So for sure, in our case, it was the times we were running out of money. I think it happened like a couple of times early in our journey. And I think it's tougher because it's probably the loneliest times as a founder as well, because you cannot fully share it with the team and sometimes not with also your co-founders as well. So that time I decided I'll always raise money when I don't need it. But for me, those were the times that were the toughest. But if I look, of course, I don't want to run out of money again ever. But those times probably were the ones where I got like shaped the most. Like the way you show up after those days, because your body is still feeling the stress because you're imagining all sort of scenarios, and then, you know, it becomes very tough because it's an existential moment, right? But after that, like how you show up, have a plan, execute through that, and basically take the company through, I think has been the most important learning times for me. In fact, I am of the school of thought that, you know, like being happy or fulfilled day in, day out is not the goal. Like the goal should be doing the hard things every day so that you're building something that's worth building. Like not, if you start optimizing for being happy every day, you just end up optimizing for the wrong things, basically.
That's another topic.
If I can add, like, again, my observations in looking at these companies, and we ourselves, you know, we started a company, you know, we've got a business model, we ourselves are, so I feel like I'm entitled to also offer my perspective from that. And then we've seen a lot of companies deal with it. The most important things, I believe, and like pattern recognition on what companies get, you know, go down, it's like the partners holding it together, the senior people just holding it together. Like the alignment of the people at the top, if they stay together, they will figure it out. And it's kind of like you know, 90% of the battle is just showing up. It's like if you will solve whatever particular issue you have, no question about it. You're good, you're smart, you can like conquer the world. But where it goes wrong is when you get divergence of the 2 or the 3 people on the top, and then literally everything unravels. They start competing, they start making things difficult for everyone, and people choose sides. The other problem or the other challenge that we see is that the concept of a critical path or a gating item or a choke point. It's where companies have very limited third parties that they rely on. And I think what Aviv is saying is like, we didn't have money. Well, actually, the broader statement is he was hostage to some part of his value chain. Like money providers are just a part of a value. You could be hostage to somebody making GPUs if you're an AI guy. You could be hostage to grain shortages if you're a food producer. Most companies at the early stage find themselves hostage to the capital as an input to what they're doing. And then they say, you know, it becomes, well, raising money was the hard part. No, the challenge is that you allowed yourself to be hostage to a certain critical path, third party, and then you're sitting around waiting for someone else to do. You need something from someone else. So if you're partners, you can solve any problem. Where you get into issues is 1, if the partnership breaks down, and 2, if you allow yourself to be dependent on somebody else who's not one of those partners. And so, like, I can't stress the importance of making sure that you're diversified in everything that you are reliant on. If it's money, you've got to have lots of different investors that you can call on if you need the money. Remember Silicon Valley Bank? Do you remember when that went down? Yes. We had all of our money with that bank. Moreover, we had gone to like 50 portfolio companies and told them, oh, you should open up a Silicon Valley Bank. They're really easy. They're really good. So we had and it was like, oh my, and then you don't even realize our bank account. We would have thought that's a critical path item. That's a choke point. And my God, was it a doozy? And like, but you had to wake up and go, okay.
So that was your worst day at the office. That was your toughest day.
That was that was the most like urgent problem that we probably ever had to deal with. Yeah. That was bad. Yeah.
Okay. All right, moving on to another topic as well. All of you are building companies for emerging markets. Okay, how is that different in this context?
I think maybe the constraints are different. With tackling an emerging market problem, you face a lot of price sensitivity. And sometimes you also have, maybe like talent scarcity as well. So I think tackling an emerging market problem requires this kind of very frugal mindset. And, then you have to kind of, materialize that over your entire sort of culture of the company, right? So I think, tackling an emerging market is just fundamentally quite different. You may not be building, cutting edge, technology that's, at the bleeding edge of whatever innovation you're doing, but, you have to sort of take a different approach, right? So I think, with what we're doing, which is solving a very physical world problem, oftentimes we get asked, oh, is it deep tech? Does it have, it's not a silver bullet. It's really kind of boils down to this complex coordination, right? Where you have to just be good at so many different things, piece it together, stitch it together very nicely, and then deliver value.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we often joke about this among founders that the emerging market founders are like the tough kids in the tough family. Like how in tough families, kids have to grow up faster, be responsible faster. Like everything from government changes, currency, all of these you have to face. So there are two things I noticed that is like quite different from, let's say, a Silicon Valley or like a more evolved kind of an ecosystem founder. So number one is, in emerging market, focus can often be a double-edged sword. Now, I don't mean it like when execution you have to focus on one thing at a time, but when you're building, you have to look left and right. Like around your core business, things will not be built. So it sometimes becomes like a complex business model, but in emerging market, you have to do it. Like in US, you can get like an SMS API, like something that specific and build $1 billion company. But in emerging market, you have to always look left and right and build things around your core business. So that was the number one thing that is probably not very obvious for
Which is very interesting because investors usually want you to focus, right?
Yeah.
And then
yeah, so that's one. The other thing I realized is who you're competing against. Like in emerging markets, in most of the cases than not, it becomes the large informal economy. Now, in other ecosystems, like you have like a competition, it can be an incumbent or can be like another startup, so you can go for kill, right? So you have that strategy and plan. But informal economy is like an entirely different beast on its own. So you cannot really go after like the same manner. So you probably have to evolve in a manner where you're somehow integrating them or basically figure out ways to make sure you, at the end of the day, you have to do that. You cannot really go after the same way you do for competition. But these are the two main things I have realized are very different, like when I speak with other founders and also investors.
Tamer, what about for an investor? How's it different when you're looking at emerging markets or where the exits? Because we're going to.
So both of the answers were really good. Like really inside. What was the question to begin with?
It was about tackling emerging markets, like when you're scaling within emerging markets. So they looked at it from a founder's perspective. As an investor, do you feel like it's different as you're investing in companies that potentially don't even have a very clear exit path, right?
Yeah, I mean, yes. I think the principle, what I would say is the main thing that we think about is actually market size, okay? That's like access to big markets and the market being large enough to drive a large outcome. And so I actually agree that there's all sorts of hairy, like informal economy is like, it's the way behavioral, differences and GDP per capita, okay, consumer purchasing power, these are very different in these different markets. But the bigger challenge is that emerging markets tend to be like small and fragmented from an overall GDP standpoint, right? Qatar is probably, 400 billion of GDP, something like that, 250, 300, 400, somewhere between 250 and 500 billion of GDP. It's really not big from an overall opportunity size standpoint. And nor is Bangladesh, to be honest. A lot of people, 165 million people, but yeah, $3,500 GDP per capita, something like that. So it's like they're small actually in the opportunity. So yeah, one, you have to deal with all these difficult stuff, But the way we think about it is like the really big issue with the emerging markets is that none of them by themselves, they tend to be small and subscale. Even Egypt, people talk about how big Egypt is. Egypt is a small in terms of overall GDP. So that's like the
So for you,
challenge.
that's the main issue is the
That's the
market
issue.
size and how tackling that.
Right.
How to-
But we, by the way, it's like I have unwavering faith in like the startup-y ecosystem where we play to solve the world's problems. I just think that the companies will be able to. I think that at the national level, almost every country, the walls are getting higher, the borders are getting tighter, and like the walls are getting higher. It's getting harder to. But it's the companies who are going to figure out how to like
break them up.
unify the or aggregate the markets, if you will. Yeah.
I'm going to get to the last topic, which is more about the exits. So, as we all know, exits is a big part of this entire game for founders and for investors. Do you think about it as day one, as you're building your company? Are you thinking about that exit? That's the first question. And should you? And as an investor, the same question. Are you thinking about the exit as you're investing? And the second thing is, as you get close to growing your business, how do you plan for that? What are you methodologically planning for an exit and making strategic decisions accordingly, or is it really just whenever it comes, I'm just focusing on grabbing market share and growing?
Well, we didn't at first, to be completely honest, and then we quickly got feedback that, hey, you need to put a slide on exit, right? VCs love exits. So we conjured up a slide but that exercise then kind of put us in this frame of like, okay, let's start observing some kind of bigger trends, some tailwinds, and then you start observing, I think, like larger trends that you can kind of like just fit yourself in, right? So I think we started thinking about that a lot more in terms of how do we fit within these larger kind of market trends. But I think for us, we personally want to play the long game. We want to build a sustainable company. So an exit for us is, maybe more of an IPO versus an acquisition per se. But, of course, we're open to either.
Yeah, I think there are two parts of exit. One is the company's exit. The other is giving exits to early employees and investors. So I think on the second part, I think a founder's role is to actively think about it. Like it's sort of like a train, right? So some people will come in, next session they will get off, new people will come in. So if you don't manage that process actively, I think it basically becomes a chaos. So I am of the school of thought that for that part, you basically have to be more,
proactive,
strategic. But you should not think about the exit of the company. I am more extreme than ever. Like you should build a company that never has to exit. And in that case, the best exits happen when you don't plan for it. Like if you look at WhatsApp, Instagram, all of these are like that. So I think that from the company's point of view, never plan for an exit. And even IPO for me, for example, is the starting of a journey. Like it's the start of something bigger, right? So the advantage of this point of view is you always take the right decisions, and that point you have like a much better exit compared to if you actively plan about it. And early days, I think definitely companies should not think about exit. You have to start build, figure out where you are in the entire market, then options open up, and then you figure out how to do exits.
Yeah, I want to. In the audience, like, who is a entrepreneur? Like, if you're, okay, so like most, and who's an investor? Who considers themselves to be an investor? Okay. And who is like neither of those? Okay, I work for a company that's, okay, all right. So it's like heavy on entrepreneurs. So that's good. I think that it's like Nathan. It's like we didn't think about it. We like in my experience as a venture capital guy, it's like we definitely didn't think about that enough. It actually is really important. And it's not necessarily the way that you may think that it's like we need exits so that we can make money. Like you do need to you need to exit companies, or else the whole business model of a venture capital firm doesn't work. Like it depends on that, and so that's important. But what's more important is to think that these companies, everyone who's starting a company, whether you thought about this deliberately or you just like kind of absorbed it, and now it's just like the way that you talk. But almost every company now talks in terms of like seed, Series A, Series B, Series D, we raise successive amounts of money from people, thereby diluting ourselves and diluting other earlier investors as I continue to feed this company that may, earn losses for a long period of time. But I'll keep on investing because I'm growing a lot. And that's just the way that this company works. And so inherently, your way that you grow depends on the next funding that comes in. And if there is no end point, then at some point you run out of people to go to. You run out you need the last person, or else it becomes a hot potato. You cannot have an ecosystem around the perception of a hot potato. There needs to be and so the IPO, and you're right, it's the start of a journey. But if you think about the IPO, if there's a credible path for Nathan to get to an IPO, then guess who will show up, the next day? The pre-IPO investor. If the pre-IPO investor is only going to invest because he knows that there's a buyer on the other side. And so if the pre-IPO investor is there, guess who's there? The growth guy is there. And everybody knows that we need growth. That's a problem today in the GCC and the Bashar al-Awsat. Everyone's we're low on growth capital. There's no growth investors. Well, and should we, and the instinct is for government groups to be well, should we just create growth investors? And the answer is I don't think so. I think what you should do is loosen up the IPO markets. Because as soon as the IPO markets are open, trust me, the pre-IPO guys are there the next day. They're almost like bottom feeders, these guys. They're flippers. And if those guys are there, then the growth guys are there. So it's you need to think about exits because you need the whole chain to fill in so that these companies who just, who are, I believe, just taking for granted that they're going to go A, B, C, D. It's just taken for granted. It's a little bit, I think we're a little bit naive. But that's the way. So you need
basically
exits.
You need the exit. I think bottom line, you need the idea of an exit. You need a strategy of an exit.
Yeah.
Whether or not it's gonna play by the book, it's obviously not. If you have that slide in your deck with the exits with the potential, it's not gonna come from any of that on the slide. But you need to have that in mind because without the exit, it doesn't work. The business model doesn't work, right?
And by the way, to Nathan and Afif, it's the more profound response to that, or the way you address that question, is not how are you going to exit. It's what market am I going to position myself in to optimize the chances that I'll be able to get there. That's the more elevated way of answering the question. It's not you're not going to say I'm going to. It's not a you question actually. It's how are you going to position this to be in a place where that is in an environment where that is possible. That's the way that you should answer that question.
We have just a couple of minutes left. I want to see if anyone has any questions before. Is there any questions from the audience? If not, I have a few others. No? You wanted to add something, Afif?
Yeah. For me, that's the equivalent of the train journey. You have to actively think and manage the process. Early investors need to exit at Series B. Series A investor needs to exit at Series, let's say, C or D. So if you're not in the right markets where the path to IPO is not clear, that will never happen. So I think for a founder, that definitely is 100% active role. It's not a passive role. It has to be an active role for them to manage the journey of all the shareholders and employees as well.
Yeah. Okay. So there's one question here. I don't know. I'll give you my mic.
There are different rounds of investments, and obviously the angel investor takes about 33% from a Silicon Valley perspective. So when you go to a IPO or a pre-IPO round, what is, from an investor's perspective, a good shareholding for the promoter to have to feel secure that the promoter's interest is also tied into the company to scale the company?
We did that at one point, and it was at the time of after all the dilution that happens at round after round, the founder who, the people who started the company, who started with 100%, let's say there's 3 people, started with 100%, on average, at the time of the IPO, they own 15%. So they really, as more money has come in, they come down. But if you're big enough to IPO, then you'll do very well with holding that percentage of the company. Yeah.
Hi, thank you for this very high energy kind of chat, which I love in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. I come from Singapore and also spent a few years here in Qatar. So I've got a question for Nathan. Did you say that you started the company in Singapore and then you move over? can you sort of compare the two ecosystems and maybe explain, why, what did you find? What did you, in coming to Qatar, and what has been your experiences so far?
So I think that's a really good question. I mean, personally, I see Singapore as kind of like one of the best case studies of kind of like statecraft, right? And when you look at what Singapore has done, and in terms of just facilitating this ultra efficient ecosystem. So me and my founder we born and raised in Indonesia. We're very familiar with Singapore. So when we, obviously Indonesia does not share, we're nowhere near as efficient. So a lot of companies end up just headquartering in Singapore just for ease of transaction and, doing business. But coming here, I think, we see a lot of similarities. I think what we see is this kind of very top-down push, very kind of ambitious programs, and this kind of coordination across, multiple kind of government institutions, state-owned companies, into creating this ecosystem to attract companies, right? So I think we see a lot of similarities, and truthfully, we've been very impressed, I think, with just the vision that they have here, and I think when you look at the execution, we're part of QDB, Startup Qatar, QRDI is helping us as well. We work with DTA, we work with MCIT, and it really feels like although we're interfacing with so many different bodies, it does feel like everyone's just kind of on the same team, and so that feels good, and so there's a lot of optimism, I think, here as well.
Great. Thank you for that. Thank you all for listening today, and I hope to see you and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you, everyone.